In your silence, their conscience stirs and finds its voice. You are gone, and yet in that very absence, a quiet revolution begins, not of noise, but of profound stillness where the soul begins to reckon with itself. The true measure of a soul is heard when you are not there to speak for it. Seneca whispered this truth across centuries, reminding us that conscience, that inner judge, often lies dormant beneath the clamor of presence, expectation, and distraction. But when the world steps back, when your watchful gaze withdraws, the conscience awakens, raw, unfiltered, and uncompromised by external influence. What speaks when you are gone? What murmurs beneath the surface, in the void left behind? It is not emptiness but a fertile ground where conscience finds space to breathe. You became the quiet witness to this awakening. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves. It finds its voice not in the clamorous affirmations of approval or the harshness of judgment, but in the tender solitude of absence. You see, conscience is not a loudspeaker demanding attention, it is a subtle whisper, a persistent echo that only reveals its true power when the noise dissipates. Have you noticed this? That absence is not a void to be feared but a mirror reflecting back the truth of character. Let absence be the mirror that reveals their truth. It is in these moments, when no eyes watch, no hands guide, no voices instruct, that the soul stands naked before itself. Stripped of pretense, the conscience begins to speak, unmasked and unafraid. It is here, in this sacred solitude, that the essence of virtue either emerges or fades into shadow. You might wonder, why does conscience so often wait for absence to awaken? Because conscience cannot be silenced forever. In the presence of others, many wear masks crafted from fear, desire, or social expectation, masks that muffle the inner voice. The chaos of external demands drowns out the subtle signals of right and wrong. But remove the crowd, and suddenly the silence becomes a stage for the conscience to perform its true song. It is a Stoic truth that external circumstances hold no dominion over the virtuous soul, the voice within remains sovereign, awaiting the moment it can rise unchallenged. So what does this mean for you, the observer, the one who steps back? You are not abandoning, you are creating space. Space for the conscience to emerge, to speak, to reclaim its authority. You are the quiet witness to their awakening. And in this witnessing lies your strength, not in control, but in trust. Trust that the absence you create is not a void of neglect but a crucible for moral clarity. Let's pause here. Reflect on these words, their conscience finds its voice, it is more than a phrase, it is a meditation, a call to awareness. When you withdraw, what stirs beneath the surface is not silence alone but the birth of an unspoken dialogue between the soul and itself. This dialogue is often uncomfortable, raw, and revealing. It may expose flaws, regrets, and unspoken truths, but it also holds the seeds of transformation. You see, conscience is not simply a passive observer, it is an active force demanding engagement. It challenges the complacent mind, confronts the restless heart, and beckons the spirit toward virtue. But it requires solitude to do so. Without absence, the conscience remains muted, overshadowed by the cacophony of daily life. Without absence, true self-awareness is but a fleeting guest. Consider this, when you are present, you are both shield and lens. You protect, you guide, but you also filter what is seen and heard. Your presence colors the conscience's expression, shaping it to fit expectations or fears. But in your absence, the conscience sheds these filters. It becomes raw and real. It becomes a compass pointing true north, unerring and steadfast. This is not to say absence is easy. It is not a void to fill with anxiety or doubt. Rather, it is an opportunity, a Stoic invitation to witness the soul's unvarnished truth. What emerges in this silence is the soul's genuine voice, free from artifice and performance. What emerges is character in its purest form. You might ask, why does this matter? Because integrity is forged in these moments. Integrity is not a public spectacle but a private commitment. It is the silent oath taken in the absence of witness. It is the unseen labor of the conscience, persisting even when no one is watching. You became the quiet witness to this sacred process, not as a judge or a guard, but as a steward of space and time for truth to surface. Remember, let absence be the mirror that reveals their truth. It is a mirror reflecting not just what they show to the world but what they hide from it, what they whisper only in solitude. It is easy to act with virtue in the spotlight. The true test lies in what remains when the spotlight fades. This awakening of conscience is neither instantaneous nor guaranteed. It is a fragile flame, requiring patience and faith. It may flicker and struggle against the winds of doubt and denial. But it persists. Because conscience is resilient. Because virtue is not a fleeting emotion but a steadfast commitment to what is right. You see, the Stoics teach us that virtue resides within. External circumstances, presence or absence, cannot extinguish it. They can only reveal or conceal it. When you are absent, the conscience steps forward, unmasked and unafraid. It speaks not with the voice of others but with the voice of reason, courage, and justice that dwell within. So you watch in silence. You resist the urge to fill the void with noise or judgment. You trust the process of awakening, knowing that their conscience finds its voice in your absence. This is your role, not as a controller but as a witness, not as a puppeteer but as a guardian of truth's emergence. In this sacred silence, you glimpse the rawness of the human spirit. You see the struggle between shadow and light, between fear and courage, between pretense and authenticity. And you understand that absence is not loss but an invitation, a call to deeper truth and higher virtue. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves. It is a voice both fragile and fierce, a voice that demands to be heard beyond the surface of appearances. It is a voice that, once awakened, guides toward wholeness and moral clarity. You are the quiet witness to this unfolding. You became the space where conscience dares to speak. And in this, you embody a Stoic strength, a strength rooted not in control but in surrender to the moral awakening that absence allows. So when you step away, do so with the knowledge that you are not leaving emptiness behind but a fertile ground for conscience to rise. You are creating the conditions for virtue to emerge, for self-awareness to deepen, for integrity to take root. Their conscience finds its voice, and you listen. You honor the silence. You trust the process. You became the quiet witness. The true measure is in absence. Seneca. This is the first stir of awakening. The silent revolution within that begins when you are gone. It is the beginning of a journey, not away from virtue but toward it. And it is here, in this stillness, where the soul's true voice begins to sing. Their conscience finds its voice, and now, within that voice, lies the ancient wisdom of the Stoics, a guide unshaken by circumstance, unwavering in its clarity. You are no longer merely a witness, you become a student of this inner dialogue, a seeker of the reason and virtue that dwell beneath the surface. The Stoics taught us that virtue and reason are not gifts bestowed by the world but treasures embedded deep within. They dwell in the sanctuary of the mind, immune to external chaos, waiting patiently for us to awaken and listen. Have you ever pondered how the voice within can rise unbowed by the tumult outside? How, even when the world spins wildly, the soul can remain grounded in truth? This is the heart of Stoicism, an unshakable belief that our inner moral compass is sovereign, that external circumstances hold no dominion over our virtue. It is not what happens to us but how we respond that defines our character. You became the quiet witness, not only to conscience awakening but to the emergence of reason as its steadfast companion. Reason, the rational eye that discerns right from wrong, the steady hand that guides action free from impulse or fear. The Stoics urged us to cultivate this reason, to practice mindfulness of our thoughts and emotions, so that conscience can speak clearly, unclouded by passion or distraction. Think of conscience as a lamp in a dark room. When the mind is cluttered, the flame flickers and dims. But through mindfulness, through deliberate self-awareness, you clear the space around it. You silence the noise, calm the unrest, and the lamp's light grows steady and bright. This is no small task. It requires discipline to observe oneself without judgment, to witness thoughts and feelings as passing clouds rather than permanent storms. Why does this matter? Because conscience is more than a feeling, it is a reasoned judgment about what is right and wrong, about what aligns with our nature and what deviates from it. The Stoics believed that living according to nature meant living in harmony with reason and virtue. And this harmony is accessible only when we cultivate the inner voice that conscience represents. You may ask, how do I cultivate this voice? By turning inward with courage and honesty. By questioning your impulses, is this just? Is this courageous? Is this wise? These questions are the tools of self-governance, the instruments that sharpen the conscience's edge. They create a dialogue between the heart and the mind, between desire and duty, between short-term impulses and long-term values. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves, but it speaks clearest when reason joins the conversation. It is reason that tempers emotion, that transforms fleeting feelings into enduring principles. It is reason that keeps the conscience anchored when the winds of doubt and temptation blow fierce. Consider the Stoic ideal of virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, as the pillars that hold the conscience steady. These are not abstract ideals but practical guides, lived through daily choices and actions. Wisdom teaches you to see beyond immediate gratification, courage compels you to face discomfort and uncertainty, justice calls you to fairness and integrity, temperance demands self-control and balance. When conscience aligns with these virtues, it becomes a powerful force, an inner compass that guides you through the fog of confusion and distraction. It is no longer a whisper but a clarion call to act with honor, even when no one watches, especially when no one watches. You became the quiet witness to this unfolding because you recognize that the true test of virtue is independence from external validation. The Stoics remind us that virtue is its own reward, and that the approval or disapproval of others is beside the point. What matters is fidelity to the internal law, the voice of conscience reasoned and refined. This is why mindfulness and self-awareness are not mere practices but acts of moral courage. They require you to face yourself without flinching, to hold your character up to the light and see what is revealed. It is uncomfortable, yes. The Stoics never promised ease in the pursuit of virtue. But it is in this discomfort that growth occurs, in this tension that strength is forged. You might feel tempted to silence this inner voice when it challenges your habits or comforts. But remember, their conscience finds its voice in absence, and reason gives it clarity and direction. To ignore this voice is to betray your own moral essence, to surrender your sovereignty to fleeting whims or external pressures. Imagine for a moment the power that comes from mastering this inner dialogue. The power to act with integrity regardless of circumstance, to navigate life's storms with calm resolve, to live authentically without the need for masks or approval. This is the promise of Stoicism and the gift of conscience awakened and guided by reason. You are not alone in this endeavor. The Stoics walked this path before you, reminding us that our nature is rational and social, that we are meant to live in accordance with reason and virtue. They teach that by cultivating the inner voice, by practicing mindfulness and self-awareness, we align ourselves with the universal order, a harmony that transcends chaos and confusion. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves, and it speaks wisest when reason stands beside it. You became the quiet witness, the steward of this sacred unfolding, as conscience and reason intertwine to illuminate the path toward virtuous living. So, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you retreat into distraction, or will you embrace the challenge of self-awareness? Will you let the voice within be drowned out, or will you listen intently, nurture its clarity, and act upon its guidance? Remember, the true measure is in absence. Seneca. Let absence be the mirror that reveals their truth. Their conscience finds its voice, and reason shapes its message. You are the quiet witness. You became the steward of virtue's awakening. In this presence of absence, you find not emptiness but a space rich with possibility, a space where conscience and reason converge to guide, empower, and transform. This is the Stoic path, the path of inner mastery, the journey of a soul unfolding into its highest expression. Their conscience finds its voice. You listen. You learn. You rise. Their conscience finds its voice, and in the quiet that follows, absence reveals itself not as abandonment but as a powerful catalyst for transformation. You became the silent witness to this unfolding truth, that stepping away is not a retreat but an invitation to self-examination, a beckoning toward the depths where authentic morality resides. Have you ever noticed how distance, whether physical or emotional, clears the fog of distraction and noise, allowing the inner voice to grow stronger, more articulate? It is in this space that conscience sheds its hesitations and begins to speak with clarity. Let absence be the mirror that reveals their truth. This reflection is not a superficial image shaped by fleeting moods or external pressures but a deep dive into the wellspring of values and ethical responsibilities. When the world's clamor fades, what remains is the raw, unfiltered dialogue between the soul and itself. And it is here, in this sacred solitude, that the conscience grows, no longer muffled by the demands of presence or performance, but free to breathe, to question, to insist upon integrity. You might feel the urge to fill this void with reassurance, with reminders or judgments, but resist. The power of absence lies in its capacity to foster detachment, not indifference, but a deliberate stepping back to allow clarity to emerge. This is not abandonment, it is a profound act of trust in the conscience's resilience and wisdom. You became the quiet witness, creating the space for this self-reflective process to unfold without interference. Do you see how absence reframes the narrative? It transforms the void into fertile ground where conscience can cultivate growth. Without the distractions of presence, without the noise of expectation, the inner voice no longer competes for attention, it commands it. This is the paradox of solitude. In seeming emptiness, there is fullness; in withdrawal, there is engagement; in silence, there is profound communication. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves, but it is the absence of external influence that grants it the freedom to evolve. It is here that moral awakening takes root, where the seeds of self-awareness find soil rich enough to nurture them. This awakening is not instantaneous, it is a gradual unfolding, a process requiring patience and openness. The soul cannot be rushed, it must be allowed to wrestle with its shadows and light in its own time. Consider the role of detachment in this process. Detachment is often misunderstood as coldness or disengagement, but in the Stoic tradition, it is the art of seeing things as they are without being enslaved by them. It is the ability to observe one's thoughts, emotions, and actions from a distance, to discern what belongs to the self and what is mere noise. This detachment is the soil in which conscience grows strong and clear, free from the distortions of passion or prejudice. You became the steward of this detachment, not by imposing distance but by embodying it, by holding firm to your boundaries while honoring the soul's need for solitude. This balance is delicate, it requires emotional resilience and moral clarity. It asks you to resist the temptation to intervene prematurely, to trust that the conscience, when given space, will find its way. Have you ever asked yourself why absence often leads to such profound insight? Because it removes the crutches of dependency, the need for approval, the fear of judgment, the habit of distraction. In absence, the soul stands naked before itself, confronted by its own choices, values, and contradictions. It is a moment of reckoning, a crossroads where the path to growth or regression is revealed. Their conscience finds its voice here, in this sacred pause. It is an inner voice that challenges complacency, that demands accountability, that insists upon authenticity. It is a voice that cannot be silenced by convenience or fear, only heard when the external noise subsides. You might feel the discomfort of this silence, the unease of watching from afar as the conscience wrestles with its truth. But know this, discomfort is the crucible of growth. The Stoics taught that virtue is forged in adversity, that the soul's strength emerges not from ease but from confronting the challenges within. You became the quiet witness to this sacred struggle, holding space for the conscience to emerge stronger and clearer. Let's reflect on this. You are the quiet witness to their awakening. This is not a passive role but an active one. It requires patience, compassion, and steadfastness. It demands that you hold your own judgments and impulses lightly, allowing the conscience to speak its truth without interference. In doing so, you honor the soul's journey toward self-mastery. This process of self-reflection in absence is also a journey of acceptance. Acceptance, not resignation, but a clear-eyed acknowledgement of reality. The Stoics remind us that we cannot control external events, but we can control our responses. In absence, the conscience learns to accept what is, to discern what can be changed, and to act with wisdom and courage. You may wonder how to support this awakening without overshadowing it. The answer lies in trust and boundaries. Trust that the conscience is resilient, that it possesses the inner strength to navigate its own darkness and light. Boundaries that protect the space needed for reflection without intrusion or control. You became the guardian of this space, not its master. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves, and in this void, transformation is possible. The absence you create is not a retreat but a powerful invitation to growth. It is a call to step back, to observe, to allow the soul's true voice to arise unencumbered. Have you ever experienced the profound clarity that comes from solitude? The way the mind sharpens, the heart softens, and the spirit awakens? This is the gift of absence, a space where conscience and self-awareness intertwine to reveal what truly matters. You are not abandoning responsibility, you are embracing it in its highest form. Responsibility that honors the individual's capacity for moral growth, that respects the inner process of awakening, that trusts in the power of absence to illuminate truth. So when absence comes, welcome it not with fear but with reverence. Recognize it as a sacred pause, a moment pregnant with possibility. You became the quiet witness, the steward of this transformative silence, the guardian of conscience's awakening. Their conscience finds its voice, and in this voice lies the promise of deeper self-understanding, greater integrity, and the courage to live authentically. It is the voice that emerges when distractions fade, when judgment is suspended, when the soul stands alone and unafraid. You watch, you hold, you trust. You became the quiet witness. Let absence be the mirror that reveals their truth. The true measure is in absence. Seneca. In this space, the soul does not wander lost but finds itself anew, guided by the inner light of conscience awakened and strengthened by solitude. It is here, in this sacred silence, that the journey toward moral clarity continues to unfold. Their conscience finds its voice, and now it stands as a steadfast guide, a moral compass pointing true north amidst the shifting landscapes of life. You became the quiet witness to this emergence, recognizing that conscience is not a fleeting whisper but a powerful internal authority demanding alignment with nature and reason. This is the essence of moral responsibility, the bedrock of integrity that arises when you listen deeply to the voice within, even when external enforcement is absent. What does it mean to live according to nature and reason? For the Stoics, it means to live in harmony with the rational order of the universe and the virtues that sustain it: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. It is a call to act not out of impulse or convenience but from an inner conviction rooted in understanding and moral clarity. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves, urging action that reflects these eternal principles. You see, conscience is more than a passive feeling of guilt or obligation, it is an active force compelling you toward responsibility. It calls you to own your choices, to face the consequences, and to act with honesty and fairness. This internal guide does not wait for external reward or punishment, it exists as a beacon of self-governance, a reminder that true virtue comes from within. Imagine the courage it takes to heed this voice, especially when no one is watching. It is easy to follow the crowd, to seek validation from others, to bend under social pressure. But the awakened conscience demands something greater, a commitment to act rightly for its own sake. This is the crux of moral responsibility, to be accountable first to yourself, to the inner law that governs your character. You became the guardian of this accountability, not by controlling others but by embodying integrity in your own actions. Integrity is not a show put on for the world, it is a private commitment to truthfulness and consistency. It is the silent oath kept in the absence of witness. When you honor this, you set a standard that inspires rather than coerces, that invites growth rather than demands compliance. Emotional resilience plays a vital role here. Listening to conscience, acting on it, is not always comfortable. It may bring discomfort, fear, or doubt. But these emotions are not signs of weakness, they are the crucible in which strength is forged. The Stoics taught that virtue is not the absence of difficulty but the mastery of it. To trust your conscience is to trust your capacity to endure and grow through moral challenges. Their conscience finds its voice in this inner struggle, rising above the noise of fear and temptation. It is a voice that insists on justice even when it is inconvenient, that calls for courage in the face of uncertainty, that demands temperance when desires pull you astray. This voice is the true measure of your character, the quiet strength that sustains you beyond the applause or condemnation of others. You might ask, how do you cultivate this moral responsibility? By practicing self-mastery, by observing your impulses without surrendering to them, by reflecting on your values and aligning your actions accordingly. This is not a one-time decision but a continuous process, a daily reaffirmation of your commitment to live virtuously. You became the quiet witness not only to the awakening of conscience but to the ongoing discipline of moral living. This discipline requires honesty with yourself, acknowledging failures without despair, celebrating progress without pride. It demands that you hold yourself to the highest standard, not to punish but to elevate. Consider the power of this internal guide when external rules fall away. When supervision ends, when oversight ceases, when accountability feels distant, what remains? The answer is conscience, that inner voice that neither fades nor falters. It is the ultimate source of moral direction, the foundation upon which true freedom rests. Freedom, the Stoics remind us, is not license to do as we please but the capacity to live in accordance with virtue. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves, and it calls you to this freedom, the freedom of self-governance grounded in reason and moral clarity. You embody this freedom when you choose integrity over convenience, responsibility over blame, courage over fear. You became the quiet witness to these choices, affirming that true power lies not in control over others but in mastery of self. This mastery is a dynamic balance between strength and humility, between firmness and compassion. It recognizes that moral responsibility includes forgiving yourself for past errors while committing to better choices ahead. It holds space for growth without excusing wrongdoing. Their conscience finds its voice in this balance, guiding you to act with justice and wisdom, to embrace your role as both student and teacher in the school of life. It invites you to lead by example, to show others that virtue is attainable not through grand gestures but through everyday acts of honesty and courage. You might feel the weight of this responsibility, the gravity of being steward to such an inner guide. But remember, you are not alone. The Stoics walked this path before you, reminding us that virtue is a shared human endeavor, a collective pursuit of excellence rooted in reason. You became the quiet witness to this legacy, carrying forward the torch of moral responsibility. You honor it not by perfection but by perseverance, not by certainty but by commitment. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves. It calls you to accountability, integrity, and resilience. It invites you to live in harmony with nature and reason, to trust the inner voice as a compass through life's complexities. You listen. You act. You rise. You became the quiet witness. Integrity is the foundation. Responsibility is the path. The true measure is in absence. Seneca. Their conscience finds its voice, and now you stand at the threshold of empowered living, a life shaped not by external chaos but by the steady hand of inner virtue. You became the quiet witness to a transformation far deeper than circumstance, one that roots itself in the timeless Stoic virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. This is the awakening of a life lived in alignment with your highest self, where the inner voice no longer whispers but commands with clarity and strength. You rise not because the world demands it, but because your conscience compels it. You became the embodiment of self-governance, the living testament to a soul that has learned to trust its own moral compass. In the absence you once feared, you found your greatest power, the power to choose, to act, and to live authentically regardless of external validation. The Stoics teach us that true strength lies not in control over others but mastery over oneself. This mastery is the fruit of embracing the inner voice, honoring the conscience as a compass that guides through uncertainty and temptation alike. You listen deeply to this voice because you recognize that wisdom is the foundation of all good living, the clear-eyed understanding of what matters, the discernment of right from wrong unclouded by fear or desire. Courage, then, is the muscle that moves you forward in the face of adversity, the resolve to act according to conscience even when the path is difficult or lonely. Justice shapes your interactions, calling you to fairness and respect, reminding you that virtue is not solitary but relational. Temperance tempers your impulses, teaching you balance and moderation, so that desire does not become a master but remains a servant to reason. Their conscience speaks loudest in the void your presence leaves, and it calls you to integrate these virtues into every choice, every moment. This integration is no abstract ideal but a lived reality, a daily practice of aligning thought, word, and deed. You became the quiet witness to this alignment, recognizing that empowered living is not a destination but a continuous journey. What does this journey ask of you? To trust the inner voice as your compass, even when the terrain is uncertain. To embrace silence as strength, to welcome absence not as loss but as a space for growth. The true measure is in absence. Seneca. You became the quiet witness, the guardian of your own moral clarity. In moments of doubt, remember that absence is not emptiness but a crucible for resilience. It is a mirror reflecting your true nature, a test of your commitment to virtue. You rise because you have learned to see beyond the immediate, to hold fast to principles that endure. You became the quiet witness to your own awakening, the architect of a life lived with intention and integrity. Their conscience finds its voice, and you answer with unwavering resolve. You trust the process of inner governance, knowing that the greatest victories are won not in the world's arena but within the chambers of the soul. You became the quiet witness to this victory, not a fleeting triumph but a lasting transformation. Embrace this power. Let it steady you in storms, illuminate your path in darkness, and sustain you when external affirmations fade. You rise, grounded in virtue, guided by conscience, and empowered by silence. Integrity is your foundation, self-mastery, your fortress, and the Stoic virtues, your allies. You became the quiet witness to a profound truth, that absence reveals not weakness but strength, not emptiness but possibility. Their conscience finds its voice, and in that voice lies the call to live authentically, courageously, and justly. So, you listen. You trust. You act. You rise. You became the quiet witness, the embodiment of a life shaped by conscience and virtue. The true measure is in absence. Seneca.